I realised that my competitors weren't going away. They were actually doing very good work, which I could learn from. So I started reaching out and writing about photographers that I admired and that I worked alongside.
That's Peter Dench with an observation about how maturity and creativity, or creativity and maturity, maybe it's the other way around, conspire in a very positive way together. And actually, whilst not necessarily in the same context, there's a letter in the second half of the show today that's really had me thinking about this idea of a life spent making photographs from a first-time writer called Ed, or Eduardo. His words have been resonating with me much this week. Right, let's make a sketchbook picture to start the walk. Oh, I'm spoiled today with not a sky that's beautifully featurous. Interesting, because that's very blue. The sun is bursting through today. It's a brisk day in terms of feeling a tad on the chilly side. But look at this. I could start with a shadow of me. Let's go F4. And it's a very sharp shadow of me against a tree with a path just meandering in the distance. Shutter speed 1500, f4, ISO 160. And if I turn the other way, and this time to try and get a bit of sunburst, go f8, 1100 shutter speed. And if I just edge into the hold on. If I edge toward the tree more here, hide myself behind these leaves, these ivy leaves, I might get a nice photograph of the path ahead. Here we go. Yeah, a few sketchbook pictures to start the day. So yes, Peter Dench is my guest today. Peter Dench, the photojournalist, Neil. Yes, the very same. But if you were making a sign for his desk, you wouldn't just stop with 15 letters. Because you'd need to add to that filmmaker, TV presenter, author, writer, the same but different, I think, educator, curator, and I'm sure I've missed a few descriptions. Suffice to say, you'd run out of desk before the desk nameplate was complete. It would hang off the edge like desk handlebars. I first came across his work many years ago within the pages of a photography magazine where I was captivated, enthralled even, by his absolute honesty about the realities of being a working photographer. And I think, I hope that comes across today. Although with Peter, there's always a nod toward great British self-derogation, which, you know me, I love. His passport looks pretty impressively stamped, that I can tell you. And his projects from afar are a subject I hope he'll return to talk about another time. Oh, there's another tree down. This is the path where I end up having to do an assault course. Bear with me. Peter, hold on for a second while I'm describing you. There we go, over that one. But it's his work on home turf that he's equally well known for, including the book Alcohol in England, or A&E for short, very apt. Questions, which could probably form their own episodes entirely another time, include a photo shoot with an actor that lasted just 12 seconds, and being shot at by former wild man of football, and now actor himself actually, Vinnie Jones. Neil, why did you not ask those questions this time? I know. I like to think we have a box set in the making. That's perhaps why, because I'd like to talk to him some more. Not so much a Netflix, but a Podflix. So, treat this in some ways like an amuse-bouche. An amuse-bouche granted with more substance. Not like one of those dishes they serve up in those fancy restaurants. You know, the ones where outwardly you're saying, oh, look at that. Oh, come on. A thumbnail-sized crouton with a drizzle of avocado puree and a single flake of Himalayan salt. Oh, you are spoiling me. Whilst inwardly you're thinking, oh, God, hope the guests don't notice that I'm going to pop down the road for a flame-grilled Whopper in a moment. But yes, I do have a feeling that Peter will be back, as they say. I'm hoping actually that we might take a photo walk together, either in London, where he's based these days, or perhaps a pilgrimage to a proper seaside town of Weymouth, where he grew up, which over winter could be interesting. I think seaside towns in England are fabulously intriguing to photograph. Well, the beaches are still there, obviously, but they've kind of turned into a cold sand pit for melancholic dog walkers. But rest assured, there's much to talk about in our conversation, as you're just about to hear.
Today on the Photo Walk.
Sometimes I don't get the camera out the bag for 4, 5, 6, 7 days, and it doesn't bother me. And you say I work close, and I think that's a key part of it. I used to call the zoom lens the aging snapper's walking stick. I had 12 to 15 years where I was flown around the globe shooting insanely trivial stories at times that had a 30% chance of getting published. So I went out on patrol with the police, I went out with ambulance services, I documented someone going through rehab. Again, that's the holy grail for me as a photographer, is to have the finances to go somewhere and have nothing to do except photograph.
That's Peter Dench, my guest on the show today. Welcome along as we make our photo walks together, a show where we walk and make pictures, photographically sketchbooking our time together each week, enjoying the letters you've sent in, the inspirational stories you've shared, and listening back to special studio conversations with guests from around this world. I'll take a peek into that mailbag in a moment for a flavour of today's letters into the show, but before that, I'd like you to know how thankful I am for those who've kept us walking here with a microphone for over 4 years. Thank you to those who believe in the podcast enough that you are now Patreon members, or Extra Milers, as I call you. And also to you-know-who sponsor this show. A service I use for buying, selling and trading used camera gear is MPB. As a website platform, mpb.com is the place where I can safely buy, sell and trade quality used photo and video gear online. And online guarantees make this a place I feel safe to buy from, unlike some other marketplaces. Here's how it works. You go online to mpb.com and search for gear that you'd like to add to your kit bag. Or if you're selling gear you no longer need, click the button at the top of the website that says Start Selling and Trading and just follow the very easy instructions. From there, you print off a packing label, stick it on the box with all your gear in it. It's collected by a courier free of charge from your front door. And the best bit, MPB pays you for your camera gear within days. And a news flash for November: if you're upgrading your gear this Black Friday, shop used, save year round. So join me and the hundreds of thousands of photographers every year in the US, Europe and the UK who know that MPB is the place to buy, sell, trade and create. Right, on the show today, Complaints Corner reopens. Oh, good, Neil. What have you said? Well, this time it's more about what one of the Extra Milers Colin Mayer may have said in Australia land. Daisei Ikatani in Japan is photographing a little bit of English country garden in Yokohama, just south of Tokyo. Eduardo Lara has a fantastically thought-provoking thought or 8 about just how photography reaches us deeply in a way not much else really can. It's a fantastic letter, it really is. And a homage to 2 extraordinary women nearer the close of the show. One is a personal story about a family member, and the other, a photographer who risked her life to photograph the mafia. Plus, it's the last Friday of the month, so your final invite to get busy with what is November's assignment. Right, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots, check. SD cards, perhaps a spare roll of film if you're using that, check. And a tin helmet for Complaints Corner. Let's walk. I love these very harsh, sharp, it's practically winter sun now, where you get these, oh, look at this, that's fantastic, these pools of light. I wonder, it's the edges of some trunks here. Another tree that's fallen. Let me just grab this, where all around it, it falls off to complete darkness. Let's choose F4. I'm using my X100V today. My Fujifilm X100V, here we go, 420 shutter speed, f4, 160 ISO, and another sketchbook picture. Everything falling off the darkness around it. So I'm throwing this line in to link seamlessly to the first letter. If you're listening to this on the day of release, I know I'm a day late, but happy Thanksgiving. And I hope you enjoy the next week of anything you can make with leftover turkey. Turkey trifle, anybody? Oh, I think I'll give that a miss, thanks. So letters, we'll start with Bryan Patterson. Where have you been, Bryan, with a Y? It's been it's got to be a good 2 years since the last time you showered us with a letter. Neil, you often mention the words, if you're listening to this on the day of release, when you mention time-sensitive stuff. I can't help thinking we're in Shawshank, waiting for our parole freedom, just like your favourite actor, Morgan Freeman. Yes, oh, he is. When I grow up, I'd like to be Morgan Freeman. Is our day of release imminent, Neil? If so, let me know what time I need to pick everybody up at the gates, would you? I do seem to have you're right, I do, Bryan with a Y, I do seem to have a penchant for incarceration stories. The Green Mile is another movie, another favourite of mine. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, although I do have to be in the right mood for that one. I'm watching Escape from Alcatraz at the moment, which is it's the Clint Eastwood one. If I get a chance to go to San Francisco, that is the first place on my list. I'm out on the boat with a camera and mission. I'd love to go and photograph. I know it's been done 1,000,001 times before. I'd have to have a good think on the flight over. I'd have a bit of time to think about it. What I might do that makes it a bit different. I suppose using photography with sound design, which is apposite, as you'll hear, would be one of those things I would think about. I'm going to talk about sound design when it comes to a quick chat about Scotland in a while. We're doing something new in 2025, so we are, yes. So thank you, Bryan, for your mail with a Y, Bryan with a Y. And then from Complaints Corner, one's come flooding in from Colin Mayer. Dear Mr. James, sounds serious. Are you from the HMRC? That's how they usually start. I'd like to say that I thoroughly enjoyed episode 452, The Secrets of Vogue House, and the new points of view / complaints section. I think this is a feature of the show that should be built upon. I never really planned to have a complaints section as part of this show. Your mispronunciation, which is what caused the complaint to come flooding in, of iguana, I think I called it iguana, didn't I? Several times through the show. Iguana, when talking to the wildlife photographer Jason Edwards, had me in stitches. Let me explain. When I first left Scotland land and migrated to Australia land, I was reading an Australian animal storybook to my friend's young children. A is for Australian animals. It was one of those alphabet-based storybooks, very easy to read, or so it should have been. The house was quite busy, with lots of noise from people chatting, and I started reading. The B's and C's were easy enough, bilbies and bandicoots, cockatoos too. However, when I turned the page to do D and E, things went a bit quiet around the house. Dingoes and echidnia. A deadly silence fell upon the room, broken by my mate telling me I'd incorrectly pronounced echidna. Bloody oath, Colin, what sort of animal is that you're talking about? Echidnia, I repeated. Echidnia, you know, echidnia. It's pronounced echidna, you silly wombat. And that was my welcome to the new vocabulary of Australia. I'm sure knowing some Australians very well, and having spent a bit of time there, not long, a month or so, but enough time to realise that wombat isn't universally used. Colin, I'm still reeling from a 10-year-old Jack, my eldest 10-year-old at the time, Jack, asking me as he sat in the back of the car as we were travelling along the Pacific Highway. Oh, fantastic. What a route that is. Daddy, he said, did the man on the radio just say wah? To which Myself and Sam looked at each other, knowing full well that's what the man on the radio had just said, and we couldn't quite believe it either. There we were as a family, driving up this beautifully sunny Pacific Highway, listening to, what's a radio station there? Triple M, something like that. And there was the breakfast show host at, 8:30 in the morning, describing people who fly tip as wanks. True story, that. Anyway, Neil, don't feel too much like a silly possum, which is a great Australianism when you get the occasional word wrong. It happens to us all, like quite often. Keep up the good work. I'll drop $1 in the pot. From Colin Mayer. The famous dollar in the pot word. Like. I spotted it. Like. Like invading a sentence when it doesn't need to be there. I'm sure I use so many myself, Colin. I'm sure I'll be at least $26 lighter by the end of the show, as per usual. Oh, look at this. Sorry. I must just get another... Oh, I've started with a vigour getting my sketchbook photographs. There's a yellow leaf here with the light is just coming through the trees just here, and very low down there's this yellow leaf, and it's got the sun. It's being backlit. It's just one leaf that's shining out amongst the many here, and it's backlit beautifully, and it's almost like somebody's got a tiny LED the other side lighting this leaf. Let me get another one. F4. I'm gonna just underexpose by 2.5 stops. Oh, the lights come brilliantly at this moment. It's almost like it's doing us a favour. Minus 2.5 stops. F4, 160 ISO. Let's have a look. Oh, that's good. I might have to get my knees dirty and get one really low down. Let's get one there. There we go. Perfect. Well, I say perfect.
Through everything, here we stand, hand in hand, I'm yours.
As per usual, the photographs we talk about that you've sent in that form some of the stories in our show, I will pop those on the show page today alongside my sketchbook photographs that I make as I walk the path in the photo walk today. It's always an absolute joy to have letters from countries we don't regularly receive them from. So here is one from Daisei Ikatani, or Chip. Dear Neil, am I in trouble again? That's 2 dears and as many letters. Thank you for bringing us along on your photo walks, or at least I assume they're real. They most certainly are. Really. I know I've not had many, but now and then somebody says, are they real sounds of you walking? Like this. Or, I'm going to drag my feet a bit now. Kick a few leaves. Or are they sound effects? Or Foley is the word, isn't it? No, it's all real. That's why I get sometimes a little bit frustrated when there's a lot of planes. And I'm walking on the Brimpton path today, which is a path I often tread when I haven't got Sir Barkalot with me, as I haven't today. But it's just down the road from a small aerodrome. And at the moment, touch wood, let's find a tree. There we go. Touch wood, no aircraft. But because there's no clouds in the sky, I would imagine at some stage we're going to hear one. But yes, it is real. Chip, I love the format, the discussions, he says, and especially the sound design. Being a fan of audio-only podcasts, it really pulls me in. Chip, I appreciate your thoughts on that. Audio is very precious to me in the way you can tell stories. So I do come from a background in radio because, without pictures, your brain, your imagination, as they said during my radio training, that fills in the gaps. You make the experience really personal and engaging, I think, with sound design, although it's a lot more sound accident than by design on this show. As for the topic, says Chip, how does photography and walking make you feel? Last month, in the heart of summer here, so I know I've had this letter a couple of months now, I took a photo walk at Yokohama English Garden, located just a short train ride south of Tokyo. It is a place, Chip, on my list of places I really want to go. As I wandered, I found myself wondering if the garden truly resembled an authentic English garden, or if it were more of a Japanese reinterpretation. I'll put the picture that goes with this on the show page, by the way. Look, and as if by design, an aircraft chip just on finals into the aerodrome. In true Japanese fashion, the garden, says Chip, combined English garden elements with local features like wind chimes and other traditional Japanese motifs. I like a good wind chime. Sam finds them a bit spooky. They're a bit, for her, wind chimes are a bit, it's a bit creepy, isn't it? There's a garden just down the way that has wind. It's like Wind Chime City. And when it's a bit windy, I don't think Sam goes outside. I've attached a photograph of a bench painted with a Union Jack. Locals here, says Chip, might say, wow, this is a real English garden. But I can't help wondering if a Union Jack in a garden might seem a little bit odd to somebody from the UK, much like seeing a Japanese flag in a Japanese garden might feel a bit off to me. Oh, Chip, yeah, we don't tend to fly the Union flag. We certainly don't paint it onto benches. But we don't fly it, not with the same passion like, certainly not like American neighbourhoods do or Canadian neighbourhoods. And I don't want to sound like a pedant, but I always say, whenever I hear this, by the way, Chip, whenever I hear Union Jack mentioned, it's only a Jack, every day's a school day, it's only a Jack when the flag is flown on the Jack staff of naval vessels. Otherwise, it's called Union flag. Thank you, Neil. Are you sure about that? Yes, I am. Anyway, says Chip, this photo walk made me think of your podcast. It was both a visual and olfactory treat, with all the roses, herbs and summer blossoms. But it did leave me curious about what it would feel like to wander through a real English garden in the UK. Thank you again for a fantastic show. Best regards, Chip. Thank you, Chip, for sending your photographs in from your photo walk and for your letter, for your first letter. I'm not... Do we have well, I suppose we do have a sort of typical English garden. It would be full. I think it would be full of pots, shrubs, maybe a pond with a proper ribbity frog, wildflowers and butterflies, and perhaps a soft rug with a wickerwork picnic hamper full of Fortnum and Mason jams and marmalades, that sort of thing. And then just to make it truly authentic, we'd pop a rusty barbecue forlornly in the corner, waiting for the one sunny day of the year that's inevitably going to be interrupted by rain. But there we go, Chip. That's probably a typical English garden. I will pop your picture on the show page today. Right, part one then of my chat today with Peter Dench. Peter is a London-based photographer and educator with over 25 years' experience in advertising, editorial and portrait work. He's co-director of the Photo North Festival, which we'll talk about later, and I'm looking forward to hopefully being able to go to next year. And he is a World Press Photo Award recipient. He'll fill in more gaps, of course. This is Peter Dench, part one of two parts today.
Peter, we're going to start with a turning point question, I think. That is the turning point that made you realise photography is the career you wanted to pursue. I'm sure it was the promise of front covers in every single national magazine, a life swimming in pound notes. But it was a long way from the bright lights of Weymouth, which is where you started your life, isn't it?
Those weren't the reasons. Turning point. Well, I didn't really have a career path anyway.
No.
I had nothing to turn away from or to. Originally, I wanted to be a cricketer, but I could never quite get over the nerves of striding out of the pitch with the real possibility of immediate failure. Around about the age of 14, I knew that wasn't something I wanted to pursue.
Was your family playing cricket at all? My father played cricket, and I know I know he would love for me to have played cricket. And I had this, I had the very same thoughts as you. What if I walk out and it's a duck?
And yeah, it was the nausea weeks before a game, and that fear. Yeah, my dad's very, very sporting at anything he applied himself to, so maybe that was it. But I just found it too disabling. So I figured immediately after I sold all my gear, all my cricket whites and cricket bat, I thought, what do I do now? And I think it was shortly after I kind of unwrapped a second-hand Pentax ME Super for Christmas. Because then I figured, like, with photography, you could still be in the action. You could still be on the front line of an event or attention, but it wasn't directed at you.
No.
So that felt like a turning point, that I had this direction, and as I progressed through my teens, I realized that I wasn't good at being told what to do by a boss. I was pretty much fired from every job that I had, from operating the checkouts at Asda to working in the local joke shop, Pontins holiday camp. So photography kind of came to the fore, and it was round about the age of 18 that I realised it had potential to send me around the world at somebody else's expense, because I'm not from a trust fund kind of background. So that again, I guess, was another turning point, or another kind of burst in the right direction, and stuck it out.
Those ME Supers, they're a familiar brand, that camera, familiar model, as being the starting muse for many a photographer. Yeah,
I didn't know that. I mean, I don't know why it was chosen. Maybe it was just that affordability bracket at the time. And I just remember after I opened it, whatever Christmas that was, probably around 86, 87, I had to phone a relative for them to talk me through how to load a roll of film, because I'd had no training at all. And I think I signed up for a night school one day a week for maybe 6 to 8 weeks shortly after.
Whenever I ask this question, the answer is invariably no. But I'm going to ask anyway. Tell me you've still got the camera.
No.
Oh, right. The very first camera I had was a Zenit. I had it until only about a year before my mother died. I found it in her attic. It was in her attic. And when I went to clear out the attic, the camera was gone. So if somebody has a small black bag with a USAF, I think it was Mildenhall, sticker on the front, that's my camera. Can I have it back, please? But you haven't got yours. It's gone.
No, and it won't be in my mother's attic. Everything, as soon as I walked out that door for
gone.
An independent life, got sold at a car boot sale or jumble sale or some sort of sale.
Your passport's pretty well stamped, 70 plus countries, but I know you as somebody who absolutely revels in the humour and quirks of British life. What is it about your fellow person of these green and eccentric lands that particularly draws you and interests you?
I guess I'd have to pull that back to my hometown as well, and the upbringing I had. That was my introduction to English. I worked at a joke shop opposite the railway station for 3 summers from around about the age of 12 to 15. But what I used to see was people coming in off the train from Bristol or the Midlands during factory shutdown, and they'd be dressed in a way that I wasn't familiar with. So I think that kind of alerted me that there was something beyond the county in which I was growing up. And it is my home. England is my home. It's the people I want to understand the most. They're more affordable to document than the other side of the world. So it's always been a draw, and it's always been my ambition to deliver my visual interpretation. It's by no means the defining interpretation. It's just a chapter alongside other photographers that are doing the same and from different locations throughout the UK. So I think a South Coast upbringing where there was a Navy base and visitors, it shaped me in a way that wouldn't have shaped someone from Newcastle or the Midlands. So, it's an inexhaustible subject.
I've heard you say that you haven't aged since 1998, which is a pretty good attitude to take into your daily work. It means the world still holds candy box interest for you. Are you as eyes wide open now as you were the day that you started as a professional photographer?
I'd like to think I'm still as wide open, if not more. The accessibility and the understanding that I've grown, I think, makes me more. I mean, I tell you what, I guess a way of explaining it was I was very competitive as a photographer. So from the age of 27 onwards, I felt other photographers were to be competed with and crushed. And then I kind of hit 40 and realised that my competitors weren't going away. They were actually doing very good work, which I could learn from. So I started reaching out and writing about photographers that I admired and that I worked alongside. So in that way, I think that kind of opened my eyes even wider to collaborations and to other photographers' approach, and I've kind of tried to escalate that as well and bring what I've learned from the people I've had the privilege to meet, and some I haven't had the privilege to meet, and bring that into my own practice. Not that I'm copying what they do, but there's certainly so much to learn from other photographers. So in that respect, I think, to loop that back to your question, I remain as enthusiastic about trying to document what's immediate to me and what's across the globe.
Was it in your 40s where a lot of the work I've seen of yours actually I've read, and that's because you diarize. You beautifully diarize your life in a way that I wasn't quite expecting when I first read your articles. Because you certainly told it like it was. It wasn't a glamorous story that you told. You ran with your personal life. You talked about your photographic life. There were moments where you even expressed that it was all falling apart, which I thought was fascinating.
Right, thank you. It's been falling apart for 25 plus years. I still pretty much exist hand to mouth. There's no great plan, no pension. It's always been on my toes kind of lifestyle, and I thought writing about it would be helpful to me and might be helpful to others, because you only ever read about other people's success, the awards they've won, the exhibitions that are opening, the commissions they've completed, and I say I've had my fair share, but I'm also aware of the weeks and months of quietness. I try not to call them lows, because I try and embrace those moments. And I feel quite privileged, I keep using that word, but that I don't have to check into an office and be told what to do. So to kind of embrace those moments between the highs and make them as productive as possible. But I'm also sort of prone to squandering time. I make no sort of, I confess to that quite openly. And, sometimes I don't get the camera out the bag for 4, 5, 6, 7 days. And it doesn't bother me, because I know that enthusiasm and that impulse to document will return. And over 25 plus years, I think you get to understand the rhythm of what it's like to be self-employed and to be this kind of photographer, and hope that the phone will ring or the email will ping with good news. And it so far it has.
I've talked much to photographers about humour in their work, and humour is a big part of your work. There's no doubt about that. Yours isn't a cruel storytelling humour. It's a more nuanced humour. It's a very powerful storytelling tool, isn't it?
It's difficult to get right. It's a fine line, and I like to think I walk that line. Sometimes I might stray the wrong side, and I think over time that line has shifted. What I felt was acceptable humour perhaps in the noughties, in the early 2000s, might not sort of strike the same chord of hilarity today. So I have to be mindful about that. But yeah, as you suggest, it is an important tool. It's something I try and use frequently, whether it's a book or a 12-picture photo essay or an exhibition. I think if you can make people laugh, make people think, and this sounds a bit grand, but affect change, for me that's a successful set of pictures. And I think humour can disarm the viewer.
Very much.
We see a lot of what's coming out of the news now, and I'm not saying that's humour should be applied to that, but you can disarm a viewer with humour, and then you can deliver a more serious message, and I think that has more impact. Or that's the way I like to deliver a set of pictures.
Intimacy is another aspect of your storytelling and your humour. You get in close with your camera. Your subjects have to trust you, though, when you do that. How do you win trust? Particularly when you're working in countries. I mean, well, let's look at your 70-plus countries with your passport stamps. You can't possibly speak the language in all those different countries. So getting to know people who are complete strangers is a skill, isn't it, that photojournalists need to find?
Yeah, I just wear a cardigan. you can never get upset with someone in a cardigan.
That's true.
No, I mean you make a serious point, and I don't speak a foreign language. I'm English, so
generally you shout loudly. In other words, is what you say.
Generally, I just don't say anything at all. But I kind of, I don't have any tattoos. I don't have any jewelry. I don't wear any slogans. This is if I'm on a job. I try and be as plain and sort of as possible, because it's not about me, it's about what I'm photographing. So I don't want to make a statement about my beliefs in any way. I just want to listen, try and understand what I'm photographing. And if people want to project their expectations onto me, that's fine. I don't lie. I don't... If someone asks me a question, I'll give them an honest answer, but I'll just kind of work quite quietly and listen. And you say I work close, and I think that's a key part of it. I used to call the zoom lens the aging snapper's walking stick. And I think you can be more inconspicuous the closer you are. I want to be able to respond to my subject if they want to engage with me. I want to smell their breath to see understand what they've been eating and drinking.
Are you sure? Goodness.
See if they've spilled anything on their top. But, most people don't care that I'm there. They want to get on with their life. They want to enjoy what they're doing or cope with the circumstance they're in. But I think if you're close, it kind of just opens up an intimacy. And, if they want to talk to me, I want to be able to hear that rather than if I'm stood 50 meters away with a zoom lens. I can't do that. And I just feel, for me personally, that unless I can get close to the situation, I think it's a bit disrespectful not to do that.
Well, Brexit falls, if not exactly in the middle of your career, somewhere in the middle-ish of your photographic career. What cultural shifts have you noticed through your lens and the stories that you've been telling? I know photographers that fall one side of the camp or the other and have become storytellers for their side of the camp. And that's I don't mind that approach at all. I mean, it's quite kind of tricky not to do with something so divisive. Especially immediately before and after that event. And I've got a new set of pictures I'm trying to get published as a book, and Brexit is the starting point. So 2016 is the first picture, and I definitely noticed. I felt there was a shift that needed documenting. People often ask if I think there's a north-south divide in England, and I'd say that it's more an urban-rural divide, a bit of a north-south divide, and certainly a London everywhere else divide as well. So, I try and keep that in mind, whatever I'm documenting. And, I am based in central London, and to see, recently we had the farmers coming into protest. Yeah, of course,
so get stuck into that and eavesdrop.
Photographically, I would have thought that was rich pickings for you.
Yeah, I mean, immediately after, pretty much, I was sent by a TV news channel in the UK called Channel 4.
Yeah.
To go and make a news piece on an area of England that, where 2/3 of the people had voted out. I was given my hometown of Weymouth as an option to make that short film. But, at the time I was a never on your own doorstep kind of photographer. So I went to a northern town of Burnley to try and understand. And I mean, I didn't know anyone outside of my immediate family who voted for Brexit. But then finding myself in Burnley in particular amongst people where it was never in doubt.
Yeah.
You know, they had the opposite experience where they hadn't come across anyone who was going to vote
To stay.
to remain,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So, yeah, that was an interesting time. And that's what you want as a photojournalist. You don't want change, but we need change in order to have new things to document.
Absolutely. I read an article where you talked to the solitary nature of photography, and that's probably become more the case now. We don't set foot in dark rooms, or there's less photographic newsrooms. It tends to be something that's done across Zoom. The idea of shoot and edit and present, it's all done online. It's a very outward-facing business where we show people the world. Conversely, though, it's usually through the lens of somebody who's quite introverted. You've lived through and been a part of that revolution where the newsrooms closed down, there's less of them. I'd be interested to get your fix on it. I mean, here I am today talking to you. Your palatial office I can see as your bedroom.
No, that's just a screensaver of a shabby chic North London flat.
I very much like it.
My mum chose these curtains. Yeah, I mean, as a photographer, it's easy to slip into that conversation about, it's not what it was.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm conscious of that. But I'm also, as you point out, have lived through both. And there are parts I miss, of course, but what I look at is I had 12 to 15 years where I was flown around the globe shooting insanely trivial stories at times that had a 30% chance of getting published. You know, you'd come back with a bag of film, throw it over the counter at the lab, go and get a glass of wine, pick up the contact sheets, go and mark them up over another glass of wine, go into your agency, see who else has been where, what they've been doing. And it was fabulous. It was an absolute treat to be in that and amongst that. But this change also has its benefits. You know, I didn't get into photography to be in front of a screen, so there is too much of that for my liking. But come 4 o'clock today, I'll down screens, tuck a newspaper under my arm, go and talk to whoever's behind the bar of my local, for an hour and a half, a couple of hours. And that's my way of kind of interacting and trying to substitute what went before. But there's also these huge advantages of social media, and I don't feel lonely for a second.
Do you like social media? We were talking just before we turned the mics on, as it were. I was talking to Peter about the fact that I engage with social media. I like social media. I look at a lot of social media. Not very good at doing social media. Yeah,
pretty much the same. But with photography, again, I'm always quite a reluctant photographer. Pointing a lens at someone isn't a natural thing to do, and I still struggle with that. It still doesn't come as naturally as I hoped. But what I try and hold on to is that feeling of what photography can do. I like the publication process, and I like it being seen. I can see the rewards. So that's what gets me through the moments when I'm actually wavering as an active photographer on a job.
Yeah.
And social media is pretty much the same. I mean, I try not to treat it as a chore, but as a necessary discipline of my practice, because I know the benefits it can deliver. And again, so while the process might be a little bit tooth pulling, the rewards are there if you can keep up the momentum and be authentic. I think that's what I try to do.
Always a good crunch on the floor today. My thanks to Peter Dench, who will be returning shortly for part 2. A word, if you will, about our Scottish Retreat 2025. Something new that I'd like to tell you about. I run this with my good friend Lynn Fraser, an extra miler, an adventurer, and each year we've been sure to retain the wonderful spirit of these weeks, whilst just working in some new ideas and places to experience as well. The new 2025 retreat and beyond is known, in Scotland this is, in the Highlands, is known as senses. For the pictures and the sound and the video and the forest bathing and the writing workshop and the connections we make with nature and each other across the week. In 2025, we'll continue with some of the popular parts of the week, like our wonderful darkroom visit. I think that really kicks the retreats off in fine style. We have a proper, it's an artistic giggle, I like to think, at the start of the week. And we'll engage all our senses on this retreat. We'll do a further creative writing experience through forest bathing with our thoughts. And this year, I'm bringing in something new. It's very much on the back of letters like Chips, where the sound design of this show is oft mentioned. A day called Highland Echoes, where we're going to work with the sounds of our time in Scotland, using sound design, possibly a bit of video, turning on that video button, yes, and using still pictures to learn how to make wonderfully evocative and potent sound diaries of the places we visit. We added some voice in last year. We could possibly do that as well, but this is more about the sound design of our pictures and the places that we visit. So the day is called Highland Echoes. It is new for 2025, and I'm hoping it may give you some ideas, some thoughts, some practical thoughts of things you can put into action when you blog or you make Instagram posts and so on, etc., etc. We stay in a wonderful part of the Highlands of Scotland, on the Black Isle near Inverness. It's far enough away to make it a true retreat, with rail and road and flight links conveniently close by. The barn has private bedrooms. There's a wonderful nightly meal prepared for us, with an opportunity to share and talk about the work that we've been making and our experiences. There's only a couple of places now left. First week, boosh, gone. Gone, or gone, as I think Johnny Mathis once sang. And there's only a couple of places now left for the second week. So go to the website, photowalk.show. You'll find Scotland 25. There's a link along the menu, the top there, and then you can fill in the form from there. Scotland 25, or if you will, Senses 2025. I'm thoroughly looking forward to it. It's the Photo Walk show. If you'd like to send in your thoughts, a letter, perhaps some pictures from where you've been travelling or walking, and it doesn't have to be a big grand adventure. Often the photographs we get are not that far from your own front yard. Then send them to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. Same email address to send in your pictures for the assignment this month. I will just remind you of the one word for this month, since they're one word assignments. We've only got it's the last few days, isn't it, of the assignment this month. All your pictures are nicely populating the assignments page now, a few more to pop up yet. And this month, the one-word photo challenge is set by photographers Jacquie, Matechuk and Lynn Fraser. The word they set this month that we'd like you to make a picture themed on is connection. And yes, you can pluralise that as well, if you will. Only one picture, though. Don't send in pictures with watermarks on them or with borders around them. If you can send them in just as a picture, and make sure you send me some links so that it can link back to your Instagram or your Vero, your blog, Facebook even, and I'll make sure I do that. Best of luck. It's fabulous to see the pictures that you've been making. Some cracking ones already in, so thank you for them. Right, this is a fairly long letter, but I think it wonderfully encapsulates a life spent making pictures and also decisions in that life. It's from Eduardo Lara from Westfield, New Jersey, and his pictures that he talks about will be on the show page today. And what really struck me actually was the title he gave his letter: Photographs as Forays into Our Own Mysteries of the Deep. You had me at photographs. Neil, how are you, says Ed. I started listening to your podcast only a few months ago, having stumbled upon it while perusing Apple Podcasts' browse feature. I'm thrilled, Eduardo, or Ed, that we are considered browsable by the great fruit of Silicon Valley. Little known fact, stand by, in the very, very early days of internet radio, so I think it was not long, it sounds like I'm about to say, not long out of short trousers or short pants, not long out of dial-up, so it was a bit too... we were an early adopter in this company, far too early actually, but I hosted a breakfast show with a friend of mine called Andy, and for some reason I think we all tried to rename ourselves with names that were applicable to parts of a computer or surfing or whatever. I don't know where Bob came from because it was called Browser and Bob in the morning. I was Browser, Andy was Bob. Bob has nothing to do with the internet, so I don't know why he called himself Bob. So, yeah, fascinating fact, Neil. Please move on. Will do. I've since been savouring each episode, says Eduardo, and I'm in no rush to reach being completely caught up, as there's so much to reflect upon within each show. I'm very pleased to have discovered your wonderful community of photographers, walkers, philosophers, and fellow life travellers. Me too, Ed. Me too. I share that with you. Having had the good fortune to work in the UK and live with a family in Surrey between 2004 and 2007, I also find that your walks and your very familiar BBC-style voice, is it? I never thought it was BBC-style. I did work for them, as you well know, but I didn't think of myself as styled BBC. Bring me very much back to our wonderful forays into the English countryside, which I still miss very much. I miss you too, Ed. How comes we didn't, I don't know, bump into each other? I've been waiting for the right prompt to send in a story to your show, and finally I found it while listening to episode 401 on my late afternoon walk today, the interview with Steve Feltham in particular. Just to fill in some gaps here, Steve Feltham is the wonderfully curious man who lives by Loch Ness, and he featured on one of our Scottish specials. He's hoping one day to see the monster, or Nessie. Actually, he believes he has made contact a few times. Anyway, I managed to get a few moments with Steve when I was recording the Scottish retreat show, and frankly, Ed, I was thrilled because I'd read a fair amount about him. He lives in an old library van by a pub. Sounds perfect, Neil. Where do we sign up? I know. I've seen Steve, says Ed, featured in a documentary. But as I recall, he was treated more as an interesting curiosity rather than the thoughtful and curious human being you interacted with during your short interview. And I agree with you there. He's always been treated as, oh, look at the eccentric bloke over there looking for Nessie. When actually the show, or rather that short interview, as you discover, was more than just a man looking for a Loch Ness monster. There was a far greater, well, I think, a deeper story behind the whole thing. I didn't realise that he'd made the conscious decision, says Ed, to become a full-time Nessie watcher when he was only 28. And more importantly, that he gave up the rat race that so many of us joined straight out of university, or before that even, without a second thought. It was a truly courageous decision on his part, and certainly something to be admired. As I now approach my own stepping off the hamster wheel after 40 years working in large American and British corporations, I can't help but wonder how my life would have turned out if I pursued my original dream of being a photojournalist or documentary filmmaker. I've made peace with the fact that I chose differently, but I am grateful that I stuck with my photography over those 40 years of meandering my way through corporate labyrinths and ladders of all kinds. It's been one of my constants and a ready source of creative expression, life documentation and self-discovery, helping me keep track of what I valued and who I was as I grew older. It's in reference to that last point that I was struck by your clearly self-conscious assertion that this pursuit of ours, this photography thing, can be a look into our own mysteries of the deep, a means to find perhaps that elusive Nessie-like true self that's ever evolving and somehow can't be pinned down or examined clinically. I found that in the last 5 years or so, my photographic practice has evolved to the point that it's no longer about capturing moments on the street or interesting places or family or school events. It's really all about self-discovery. Now, don't get me wrong, I still have loads of fun walking the streets of New York City, taking photos with my camera, photographing wild birds or military air demonstration teams at major air shows, but the photographs I end up coming back to again and again are those that only weeks or months afterward reveal a glimpse of my enigmatic self. Case in point, the 4 pictures I attach to this email. They were taken on a trip I took with my family to Ireland over the July 4th holiday weekend earlier on this year. It was a special way for me to celebrate my 60th. Come on, Ed. Yeah, don't look a day over 45. Stop that. With my wife of 35 years and 2 sons, now both grown men, the oldest of whom shares my birthday and was in turn also celebrating his milestone 30th. We spent most of the very short number of days in Dublin, but did take a day drive to see the cliffs of Moray out on the western coast of that beautiful island. 3 of the 4 photos attached were made on our journey out west, the last taken at Trinity College in the very interesting Book of Kells experience, the interactive museum, a place I want to go actually. I printed them a few weeks after my wife and I returned to our home in New Jersey, and they've sat on our dining/work table since then as I continue to process many layers of meaning within each one. I'm not going to go into any detail about my reflections, but this set, I feel, fully reveals a self in flux as I go through a redefinition at 60 years of age. A father now of 2 grown men, well along on their own life journeys, the open spaces now beckoning to be explored beyond the old role definitions of family man, businessman and provider. The vast, frightening, unknown sea beyond the safe confines of corporate life and the quiet comfort that deep within is wisdom that will help me figure out the onward passage. You've facilitated such a great community, Neil. Oh, stop it, Ed. I'll have to start dragging my sofa out in a moment and hide behind it, the sofa of flattery. And I look forward to continuing the journey with you and your guests and all your other listeners. Kind regards, Eduardo Lara, Westfield, New Jersey. Ed, although I do like to use Eduardo. Goodness, I've come to another tree. Look at this. Now this time, I really am stopped from going any further. I'll just stop here for a second, Ed, and reply to your letter instead. Thank you for the glimpse into your creative thought process. Oh, that's a beautifully written letter. It truly is, and I'm so appreciative of the time you've taken to write that and your thoughts. The picture of the steps down to the sea, that's particularly wonderful, and that will be on the show page today. It's right in my wheelhouse, that one, he says, trying to engage a nautical expression with the sea being in the picture. Just beautiful. It really is. I love the line leading you into the ocean from the top of the steps. It really takes you into the picture, into the photograph. I have a real passion for pictures like this, which is probably why many of my favourite photo walk sketchbook images are of the paths ahead. I've made one today already, 1 or 2 paths that sort of snaking somewhere, not always somewhere granted. But I'm very appreciative, Ed, of your letter, and I'm going to spend the next few minutes trying to get past this tree. Look at that. Honestly, no wonder nobody comes along this path. This is well, it's an adventure trail, I'll give you that. Shall we hear a little of our friend Steve Felton, shall we? Since you mentioned him, Ed, his thoughts about life. I'm sitting here talking to you, and Steve really does look out into the loch all the time. It's a very focused look, just in case. But I'm wondering if there's not a part of you that might be disappointed if it were found. He or she or it.
Yeah. there's possibly a part of me that thinks, well, if I saw the thing, I might not tell anyone, just because I'm too content in my beach life existence, staring vaguely southwest.
Because this van's never going back to Dorset, is it?
No, it's never going back to Dorset, and I'm quite content sitting here. Yeah. People often ask me, is what you do, is your mission the mystery or the lifestyle? And for me, it's 50-50. I love the pursuit and the mystery, and I love living in an ex-mobile library on a beach with what was that view that you're looking at there in front of you was recently voted the 6th best landscape view in Britain. That's enough to open your curtains in the morning and think, I'll just sit and see if I can spot a monster today.
So before the second half of my chat with Peter Dench today, I wanted, if you don't mind, to pay homage to two extraordinary women and nod back to the book by the late Tom Stoddart, his fantastic book, Extraordinary Women. I'll leave a link on the show page today. Although these two women didn't feature in Tom's book. The first is to a woman who passed away a few months ago, actually, who was very special to me. My Auntie Judy, who would have been celebrating her birthday today. Now, Jude featured in my ebook, Why, a Sketchbook of Life, which sounds like I'm cynically shoehorning commercialism in here, but there is context. It is important. For those who've read the book, you'll know, and I thank you for that. If you have, you'll realise just how important she was, and how, in a strange twist of events mentioned in that opening chapter, how she had a photographic input of sort, without telling the whole story of that opener. But I was thinking of Jude, and actually, I'd forgotten this, though I've remembered now. She had a very, very, very early photographic imprint on my life. When I was, I think it's about 11-ish, my dad's mum, or granny, or nanny, as well, as I called her, she passed away. And at the funeral, I, being of an age, I think it's hard to fathom the enormity of occasion, I was encouraged not to... I went to the service, the hymns and so on, but I was encouraged not to go with Mum and Dad to the actual graveside. Instead, I waited with my Uncle Andy and my Auntie Judy. And from memory, it's a bit sketchy, but I remember, I was understandably upset, I remember Auntie Judy suggesting I borrow a camera that they had, and it was paired with a tripod. The tripod, funnily enough, and for whatever reason, later on they took back, but I was left with this camera, which was the famous Zenit that I talk about. So it seems as I was remembering Auntie Judy this week, or as I do remember Auntie Judy this week, that she had a pivotal part to play in my photographic story. And then the other woman that I'd like to tell you about is an Italian photographer called Letizia Battaglia, the first Italian photographer, definitely one of the first, but I think she was the first to work for a national newspaper. The first female photographer, that is, to work for a national newspaper in Italia. I went to London last week, and I had made plans to go to the portrait, the photographer's gallery rather. It's a fantastic gallery. It's just off Oxford Street. So you come out of the tube there, and it's 5 minutes, no more, I'm sure, walk from the main underground station. Now, I appreciate this is a bit UK-centric for a moment. It's an exhibition that's on until the end of February. It's across 2 floors, 4 and 5, and the exhibition is called Life, Love and Death in Sicily. And as you can imagine by that title, it's about Italian life, and a lot of it's about the mafia and the intricacy that's part of that story. She never set out to be a photographer. And the story, her story, is frankly extraordinary. Even if you can't go to the exhibition, I am going to leave some links to her work, which I thoroughly recommend you go and see. You'll be, I promise you, you'll be all the richer for knowing her work and her outlook and her storytelling. There's also an Italian film a few years back featuring her called Shooting the Mafia, which I have made a note to self to go and watch. An apposite title, full of irony, that one. But Letizia Battaglia herself passed on in 2022, and although she spent years sort of expecting a different end, she did not die by assassination, which, when you think of the legacy of her work, being responsible for bringing many to trial as a result of her photography, she spent many years fearing assassination from the mafia. But what I find really intriguing is that she chose not to have bodyguards. In 2017, she told The Guardian in a newspaper article, "You no longer knew who your friends or enemies were. In the morning, you came out of the house and didn't know if you'd come back of an evening." So if you do get an opportunity to go to the exhibition, if you are in the UK or you're making a very special pilgrimage, then it shows Italian life photography from that period. Yes, mafia, as I say, is a big part of this event. Her pictures show the crime and the people behind the crimes. Some of it, yes, is a bit grim, but I don't think it's gratuitous in the way that it's done. And the frames are hung in such a fashion that you weave in and out of the exhibition. You feel very much a part of the stories and the pictures. And I perhaps don't recall accurately, but I do think that there was sound design. And I'm not just saying this because I truly believe this. And maybe it was happening, but I certainly felt like I certainly feel now, remembering it, that there was sound in the exhibition, that the pictures had sound to them. Neil, you sure you'd not been on the mushroom soup just round the corner first? No, honestly, I felt that there was sound design. It felt like the exhibition was certainly had sound to it. There've only been a few exhibitions I've returned to witness. Salgado was the last one, and his one did have the sound of jungle, etc., in the exhibition. But this is going to be the next one I revisit. I'm going to go back with my good friend Giles. That's the second extraordinary woman I would like to mention. And the exhibition is on till the end of February. Right, let's return to part two, the concluding part of my conversation today with Peter Dench.
I'm going to talk about football with you in a short while. It's a fascination for me. I'm a football fan and I love books about football, and you happen to have done both of that. So football in 2018, you went to Russia to photograph around the World Cup. You weren't pitch side, were you? You were photographing the story of the World Cup. What did you find in Russia in terms of football? Right,
yeah. Well, I mean, it wasn't necessarily football. Okay, so this is quite a good example of how I work as a photojournalist. You know, I'm not a spot news photographer.
No.
I'll rarely be on the front line. You know, I like to work on a longer story. So as soon as the World Cup was announced in Russia, that it would be in Russia, I knew I had to be there, that I wanted to be there. But I didn't want to be pitch side capturing the action. So I was trying to find a way that the work would be relevant after the World Cup and for years after, and would generate income.
Yeah.
So I thought, you know, the world's biggest football tournament in the world's biggest country with the world's longest single track railway journey. So it would be a reportage about scale.
Yes.
It would be a reportage about uniforms, you know, fans, the military, heroes, whether that's Harry Kane or Putin. You know, so I tried to absorb all that into the Russia reportage. So I'd photograph fans wearing Putin T-shirts.
Yeah.
There were a lot. The youth in particular seemed to, you know, have his face. I even bought myself a T-shirt, which I wore and posted on social media. And in hindsight, that wasn't such a... Now I've had to delete it because I've been working in Ukraine. So, yeah, I mean, I was in Moscow for 9 days photographing at fan zones and throughout the city. And then I took the Trans-Siberian Railway, which is a 7-day train journey across 7 time zones to Vladivostok in the east, and then flew back to Moscow for a couple of days. So it was about football in one sense, but I try and bring in all these other themes to give it longevity, I think, as a piece of work.
Your work, Football's Hidden Story. I mean, it could be depictions of very obvious stereotypes, couldn't it, really? Footballification's an interesting thing around the world, isn't it? Because no matter where you go, somewhere, if it's a remote country and it takes days to drive to somewhere, you will invariably still find somebody who's got a Barcelona top on. And I find that fascinating, and I think you do too.
Yeah, my dream is my dream is that I'll go to a obscure place in the world and see someone wearing a Bournemouth shirt, which is my team, and then I'll know they'll be that's an indication of success.
Yeah.
I mean, this was my dream assignment, the Football's Hidden Story. In 2007 it began, and interestingly, I was down to the last 2 photographers for the assignment, and it was a 15-month assignment across 20... It was
20, wasn't it?
22, 26 stories across 22 countries.
Amazing.
Something like that. And I was desperate for this commission. And the final question to the 2 photographers, including myself, was, do you shoot digital? And my competitor said, no, I shoot film on a Leica. And then they asked me the same question. And I went, absolutely. And I didn't. So I got the job. And then I immediately went home and phoned a friend of mine called Marcus Bleasdale, who was a tremendous photojournalist.
I know of
I
Marcus.
just said, what do I get?
Yeah.
Talk me through it. And so that story, Football's Hidden Story, it was FIFA funded, and we'd just go to these incredible places where football was hope, creating hope for communities, rebuilding communities. So one example would be we went to Liberia in West Africa to photograph a story about the Liberian amputee football team, where after a civil war that had wrecked the nation, football was bringing communities back together, and those who fought on different sides of the conflict were, on the same pitch in the same team. So it could have been that, or we went to South Africa where football was being used to encourage people to learn about HIV. So there'd be a lesson about that, and then afterwards everyone would play football together. So it was an incredibly unifying experience. And like you say, everywhere you went, there was a game being played in the back streets of Nepal, Calcutta, South America, obviously. Perhaps you'd expect it there. But and again, it wasn't necessarily a reportage about football, but it was, the other themes were hope, community, rebuilding, those kind of things. I'm
trying desperately to recall the photojournalist that told me this, and I can't at the moment. And it is about 3 years ago that I spoke with him. But I remember having a conversation about football and a football story he was working on. And he said, well, funnily enough, I always carry one important piece of kit with me when I travel around the world. And that's a football. He said, because if I take the football, at some stage, somebody's going to want to play that game, and it's a great conversational starter. Yeah,
I went with a film crew, so I did the stills for the editorial, and the film crew always bought a football, and wherever we were, they put it in the middle of Tiananmen Square in China and filmed it from a distance, and people just walked around it, and then eventually someone swept it up into their bin. So we had to go and retrieve it and then try again, and then a little game, but a very kind of nervous kickabout ensued.
I want to move to Odessa. Your story that you told in Odessa was fascinating. You are not a frontline photographer. You've talked about that. It's not something that necessarily is something you're interested in, if that's the right phrase. But you travel to Odessa. It's during the current conflict that you've done this. And you went to photograph on a beach.
Well, the reason I'm not a frontline photographer is I don't know what to add that isn't already being done.
Right.
And I see the work of, Lindsay Addario, Finbar O'Reilly, to name a few. And I think, well, what can I do any better than what they're doing? And I can't. And it's not my natural habitat. We spoke at the top of the program. I am from the South Coast. For the first 18 years of my life, I never lived more than a 2-minute walk from Weymouth's Golden Beach, and then I moved to Bournemouth to an even bigger beach. So that's a habitat I'm familiar with, and much the same as when the World Cup was announced in Russia. I knew I had to be there and deliver something, to add to that story. And as soon as the conflict broke out in Ukraine, I knew I wanted to contribute to that, and it took me a while to find something that excited me enough to go and that was important enough in my mind to say. So last summer of 2023, I've been keeping the beaches had been closed for various reasons. Firstly, because they weren't sure whether they'd be used as an invasion landing area, and then the Black Sea had been mined, and then the Kharkovka Dam had been blown up, and that dislodged mines, so they remained closed. And the people of Odessa were desperate for a respite from the conflict. So I was constantly checking in as to when the beaches would reopen. And when they finally did, I thought that was a positive story and a good reason for me to be there and photograph something I hadn't seen documented well.
It was a superb story. There's one particular image of a young lady who I think is sunbathing, and not far from her, as the sea laps the shore, there's a couple of military uniforms, which ties this whole history together, doesn't it?
Yeah, that really pleases me that you've mentioned that picture, because that's what made my legs start doing the Charleston. That's why I swing my legs out of bed, leave loved ones behind, to go and with that, I had that in mind. I've seen pictures of conflicts, the Twin Towers burning while someone's having a picnic in the foreground, a helicopter over a beach near Tel Aviv. And that was always an image that I wanted to get. And when I saw that, I had to pause. When I saw that scene, I had to sort of gather myself, because I realised that's why I was there. And I think I shot it up like the equivalent of an 80mm, because I was quite up high. But that made the trip worthwhile, because I wanted to show how sort of embedded in daily life sort of the military had become. So I documented hedgehog anti-tank obstacles in the town centre, and I'd been to that city on assignment before the conflict, so it was interesting for me to go back, and I hope to go back again.
We could be forever talking about your books and your projects, and I could go through your website and just sequentially go down each project, but we'd need a box set for that. So forgive me if I just pick out a few of my favourites. Drinking of England. It's one of your most iconic projects. It's a culturally specific theme, rich pickings, I would say, photographically as well, when you consider our penchant for a pint or 8 in this country. But how do you go about making sure it doesn't become a cliche? There are projects on the subject that are typically just stags and hens misbehaving over and over. Yours isn't. It takes a more nuanced look at can I call it the drinking behaviours of the Brits?
Yeah, of course. England's relationship with alcohol.
Yes.
And I have another editor to thank for that, a chap called John Easterby. I was with an agency called IPG, and he said to me when I started this reportage started it in earnest around 2000, he said, "Peter, you can't just make funny pictures. You have to have something to say." And again, it sounds rather grand, but I wanted to create an anthropological legacy where this set of pictures would be of a time and a place where historians could go to see how England and the English were sort of imbibing. And the reason the project ended was I saw a shift away from alco pops and the behaviour that I was documenting to people drinking at home and the pubs closing. So, it had a natural end to it. So, I mean, I without the guidance of John and other editors, I could quite easily, I think, have just produced a cliched set of pictures of stags and hens in Blackpool. But I wanted to work through it. So I went out on patrol with the police. I went out with ambulance services. I documented someone going through rehab. So there is you have to shoot, whether it's an 8-year reportage or whether it's a day. I like to be there at the beginning, shoot through it, and be there at the end. And from that, I decide what I think is a truth, and then I'll deliver that through the edit. So when I was, the agency I was with, there were Tom Stoddard was shooting AIDS in Africa. Zed Nelson was photographing gun culture in America, and my editor asked me what I wanted to spend the next few years documenting, and I pretended to think for a few minutes, but I always knew the answer. England's relationship with alcohol was something that I felt passionately about and that deserved or warranted a visual archive on it.
Well, we're going to come to America in a moment. You won a World Press Photo Award for Drinking of England. I don't see the award behind you.
No, it's out of shot. It's in the next room, above the telly. But part of it. So I think that was 2002, and we were my agency actively encouraged us to enter competitions. So it was the first time I entered the World Press. And I won with a set of 12 pictures in the People in the News Stories category. And I thought, that was easy. And then I've won nothing since. So I always discuss with photographers whether it's better to win something at the beginning of your career because then it elevates you. Or whether to win it at the end of your career so you're recognised, or, I still don't know.
Did it elevate you for a while?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was a proper springboard, and anyone who had any doubts that I wasn't serious about what I did, I think that certainly
very much
helped.
In Dench Does Dallas, which initially occurred to me, I may need to squint through my fingers at the pictures. You were sent packing to the States to see if America really had become great again. Dare I ask, and I'm treading carefully, what did you find then, and are you inclined and intrigued to take the same journey now in maybe a few months or maybe a year's time and see if America's become greater than great again?
Oh, well, every English photographer, I think, has to make the pilgrimage to America to start making photos. And I don't know why. Well, I know why Dallas. There's just to briefly explain, there's a very famous adult movie called Debbie Does Dallas.
I didn't feel I needed to. I thought I'd navigated that quite well.
And that made an impression on me,
yes,
along with
I can tell,
along with the soap opera Dallas.
Dallas, yes,
which I think was the 80s,
which was not in the same series, I might just add.
and the Police Academy franchise.
Oh yes, of course,
as well. Yeah. So that all fed into it. And I was at a big photography show, and I was looking to swap camera systems. So I was looking to go mirrorless. To a micro 4/3. So I was talking with the head honcho at Olympus, and he put me on the spot, and he said, "Okay, we'll give you a camera. Where do you want to go?" At which point I should have said Japan, but I knew I wanted to start a body of work, or at least start exploring America.
Yeah.
And I kind of just raced through the alphabet, and I thought Dench Does Dallas.
Oh, it was an alliteration choice.
Yeah, right. and a homage to everything that had influenced me about the city. So I went off there for, I don't know, it was only 18 days.
Yeah.
Again, that's the holy grail for me as a photographer, is to have the finances to go somewhere and have nothing to do except photograph. So I'd wake up in the morning, all I had to do was go out and photograph.
Yeah.
For 18 days.
Yeah.
And that was a real kind of, that's the dream. And to do it in America, which I felt was great and can be and is, and it's all of those things. So I also did Miami and San Francisco. So I need to I've done South Dakota. So it's coming, but it's a long and expensive passion, I suppose, and commitment.
We don't talk a lot about tech on this show and kit. I love kit. I love kit as much as the next person. But we tend to steer clear. I start to get a nosebleed if it gets too technical, that's for sure. But you did mention Olympus. And for all those people that say, it's got to be full frame, it's got to be Leica, or it's nothing. You are proof that, working with Micro Four Thirds systems, these are great storytelling machines. And perhaps we need not obsess too much over full frame, having to be full frame.
Yeah, I mean, I want a camera or a piece of kit just to capture what I see as quickly and flawlessly as possible. Yeah. And, there are so many ways that can be done. I don't want to be fiddling and dialing and pressing, I still use just the same. I was trained on medium format, so I still apply that discipline to what I'm using now.
I want to talk about Photo North. I'm looking forward to coming to it very much. But what drew you to co-found it? What was the driving purpose behind Photo North, which has been very successful?
Do you want to be put on the guest list? Is that what you're trying to?
Well, no, I'm not angling for that. I'm as happy as the next person to pay my full $1 on entry.
Okay. Apologies. How did that come about? Okay, so I live in London, which is geographically south of England, and I go to a lot of exhibitions, and I talk to the photographer who's produced the exhibition at great cost, and I say, where's it going next? And inevitably they'll say on top of the wardrobe or under the bed. Yeah. And I was kind of thinking, that's sad. And I was kind of thinking, how many existing exhibitions are there in storage at home? I have my own stack. So that was kind of the ethos behind it. How do I? Well, when I say we, it's my co-founder Sharon, who is in the north of England. Yes. So we just had the idea, let's start a festival, and we'll try and get as many of those exhibitions and give them a new home, give them a new audience. And once you do that, another gallery or festival might take them. It's all about just trying to keep things on the road, on the move. So our first couple were in the north of England. I mean, it's called Photo North, but the exhibitions don't have to have a northern theme. No. They can be international or whatever. So we're just coming. We've just done Photo North 5. So we're just currently planning the 6th instalment for the spring.
And collaboration's a big part of it, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Again, when I moved to London, I'd go to these posh galleries in Mayfair in London, and as soon as I opened the door, I could hear the receptionist tut. Because they could see I wasn't the kind of customer they wanted. Yes. And I felt uncomfortable, and I wondered how long I'd have to stand in front of a still life of a brick before I could leave. So we wanted the festival to be egoless and vibrant and inspiring and enjoyable. And we have photographers on the exhibition floor who talk with students, and hopefully there's a equality and egalitarianism to the festival. That's what we're aiming for anyway. So, we want everyone to leave nourished and inspired, nothing less.
Well, I feel very nourished and inspired having consumed your work for many, many years. And I do hope you might return and talk about the 101 projects we've not discussed today. I end with a question, and I wonder how you'll answer this. All the years you've been photographing, the decisions you've made and where you've been, the 70 passport stamps, 70 plus, and the different books you've put out, what, Peter, is your why?
Ooh, dramatic pause.
I like a dramatic pause.
I don't know. I don't know. It just feels, I go back to that phrase, to make people laugh, to make people think, and to travel the world doing it isn't a bad way to live. And if you can get the balance right, then that's the life for me. And that's the experience I had when I was 18, looking at books of Tom Wood and Paul Rees in the library at Bournemouth Art College. You know, if you can, it was just the revelation that you didn't have to get on a plane and go to the front line of someone else's war. You could get on the bus and go down the pub. And for me, that was the ignition that's got me where I am at the moment.
And my sincere thanks today to Peter Dench for being my guest. I do hope that we'll have an opportunity to spend more time with Peter. As I said right at the start of the show, there's so many stories to tell. Really, there are so many books to talk about as well. And that's it for today. Now, if you can't wait until next Friday and you'd like to walk a bit further together, then that's what the Extra Mile show is all about. And number 116 is waiting for you. And it features a friend of the show from Canada, Eric Delorme. Community are really part of the Extra Mile. It's an opportunity to talk to those who support the show with their kind donations through Patreon, which you can do too by going to the website photowalk.show and clicking the button at the top that says support the show. So Eric Delorme is one of our community members, and in our chat we shoot the breeze about creativity, starting off as the season approaches, when most people start theirs, with the projects called 365.
On this week's Extra Mile.
And we weren't that the group wasn't that rigid. There was even a line in there that said, if you really can't take a photo of the day, post a blank, a black square, whatever. It doesn't matter. And when you look back at your 365 project, that will be your day, right? If there was a blank, that's because you were busy, something bad happened, whatever it was. And it was okay. And what I've found after doing a year of that, it was at the end of that first year, I was just like, thank God this is over, because I had run out of creativity. And the next year, I didn't do the project. And by January 2nd, I was twitching. It's like, I have to grab my camera and do something.
There are lots to talk about on the Extra Mile today. As I say, it's part of the private Patreon channel supported by our wonderful community that we call Extra Milers. You can also support the show by buying the first ebook, Why? A Sketchbook of Life. Christmas is coming up. Oh, come on, Neil. All right, you can't deny me this, though. 19 answers to the why question. You know, the one I love, from photographers who've been on the show, plus my very own personal story that forms my why, and over 100 of my personal favourite sketchbook pictures from 2023. What about 2024, Neil? Oh, it's been such a year. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. Our PS is to come, our postscript to the show, but before that, let's have a play-out song, just to make some final frames to, or think about what's been said today. And it's from Fiona Hart, a new artist to me, insofar that I've only just discovered her wonderful voice. This is a song called Careless.
Shadows gone, but so much sky pulled me in under its eyes. A new city to get lost in. Always wanted to see Austin. Heard you running round again. Thought about when we first began. I was maybe 23, and you were kind of old for me. Sitting on a porch somewhere downtown, just watching hours float around. We were careless. Wish I could care less now. Always driving out and leaving the car, 'cause we took too much whiskey at the bar. We were careless. Wish I would care less now. Borderlines, they end us signs. Things weren't meant to work this time, and I'm fine with the fact. Start to call my friends back. Make a light of the dark. Walk around 1,000 parks and wonder if life is fair. Think always underrated places we are and things we know. Always agitated, lean back and let it go. Always underrated places we are and things we know. Always agitated, lean back. Shadows gone with summer skies, pull me in under its eyes. A new city to get lost in, always wanted to see Austin.
The wonderful voice of Fiona Hart, with an E, and the song is called Careless. Should we do a final sketchbook picture? That sun is beautiful, and actually this is quite nice. It's the path ahead, but one half is in total darkness through this avenue of trees, this canopy of trees. The other half is blessed, kissed by all the sunlight. 640 shutter speed, underexposed by a stop and a half, f4, well, let's go f5.6, ISO 160, and there we go, another sketchbook. Actually, I did make a picture, and I've downloaded it, so I'll need to find it, of the exhibition I was talking about a little while back. So I'll pop that up as well, so you get this idea of how you wander through the frames. A few closing thoughts before the PS. My sincere thanks to you if you are or you're just about to become an extra miler. And for all those that have thought, do you know what? I've been listening to this show for a while. I'm going to help out too in 2025. My thanks sincerely to you right now. My thanks to Neil Ford too, who looks after IT. He's in charge. Andrea Gilpin, who looks after Instagram. Andrea's in charge. And Kelly Mitchell, who looks after our Facebook members. Yes, Kelly's in charge. And somewhere down the pecking order, after Barney, that is, comes me. Right, a postscript for the show. Today it's from a photographer called Roger Kingston. A short, pithy one, this. So set your shutter speed accordingly to capture. A camera, he said, is a save button for the mind's eye.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.